I walked into my parents' lawyer's office expecting to sign inheritance papers, but instead, I watched them hand everything my grandmother's estate, her business, all of it to my cousin Rachel, who hadn't spoken to our family in 8 years. The lawyer asked me to stay after everyone left, and when he closed the door, he said 5 words that made my parents' faces go white. Miss Martin owns this firm. But how does a broke 8-year-old with $600 in her bank account secretly own one of the most prestigious law firms in Boston? I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. The morning started like any other Tuesday in March. Except I was wearing the only blazer I owned, a navy one I'd bought at a thrift store 3 years ago. My hands wouldn't stop shaking as I walked up the marble steps of Hartwell & Associates, one of Boston's oldest estate law firms. The building looked like it belonged in a movie, all granite columns and brass fixtures that probably cost more than my yearly salary as a bookkeeper. My parents had called me 2 days earlier. "Luna, we need you at the lawyer's office on Tuesday at 10 a.m. My mother, Patricia Martin, had said in that clipped tone she used when she'd already made up her mind about something. "It's about your grandmother's estate." Grandma Dorothy had passed away 6 months ago at 89. She'd been my whole world growing up, the only person who believed I could be more than what my parents saw in me. While my mom and dad pushed my younger brother Travis toward law school and my sister Melissa toward medical school, Grandma Dorothy took me to her textile company every summer. She taught me about business, about standing up for yourself, about building something that mattered. I pushed through the heavy oak doors and immediately felt out of place. The reception area had leather chairs that looked like they'd never been sat in, and oil paintings of stern-looking men in suits. A receptionist with perfect hair glanced at me over her designer glasses. "Luna Martin," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "I'm here for the reading of Dorothy Campbell's will." She nodded toward the hallway. "Conference room B. They're waiting for you." My stomach dropped. "They're waiting for you." Like I was late, like I was holding everyone up. I checked my phone, 9:58 a.m. I was early. The conference room was exactly what I expected. A long mahogany table, more oil paintings, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Boston Harbor. My parents sat on one side, both dressed like they were attending a corporate board meeting. My dad, Richard Martin, wore his expensive suit, the one he saved for important occasions. My mom had on pearls and that tight smile she wore when she was about to do something she knew I wouldn't like. But what I didn't expect was seeing Rachel Brennan sitting next to them. Rachel, my cousin, the one who told everyone at my 16th birthday party that I'd never amount to anything. The one who borrowed $3,000 from Grandma Dorothy and never paid it back. The one who stopped showing up to family events 8 years ago when her get-rich-quick schemes stopped working, and she couldn't stand being around people who knew she'd failed. "Luna, you made it," my mother said, not getting up. "You remember your cousin Rachel?" Rachel gave me a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She'd changed expensive highlights in her hair, designer handbag on the table, a confidence that seemed new. "Hey, Luna. It's been a long time." I sat down across from them, my thrift store blazer suddenly feeling even cheaper. "What's Rachel doing here?" Before anyone could answer, a man in his 60s entered the room. Silver hair, 3-piece suit, the kind of presence that commanded attention. "Good morning, everyone. I'm Edward Hartwell, senior partner at Hartwell & Associates. Thank you, all, for coming." He sat at the head of the table and opened a leather portfolio. "We're here for the reading of Dorothy Campbell's last will and testament." My heart was pounding. Grandma Dorothy had always hinted that she'd leave me something, not money necessarily, but something meaningful. Her textile company may, or at least have a stake in it. She knew how much I loved that business. Edward Hartwell cleared his throat. Dorothy Campbell was very specific about her wishes. She spent considerable time with us over the past 2 years updating her estate plan. He pulled out several documents. The bulk of Mrs. Campbell's estate, including her 40% stake in Campbell Textiles, her properties in Cape Cod and Martha's Vineyard, and her investment portfolio valued at approximately $8.3 million, will be distributed as follows. I held my breath. To her granddaughter, Rachel Marie Brennan. The room tilted, I must have heard wrong. I looked at Rachel, who was trying very hard not to smile. I looked at my parents, who wouldn't meet my eyes. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice barely working. "Did you just say Rachel gets everything?" Edward Hartwell continued as if I hadn't spoken. "Additionally, Mrs. Campbell left her personal jewelry collection and her residence in Beacon Hill to Rachel Brennan, along with—" "This is a mistake," I interrupted, standing up. "My grandmother wouldn't. We were close. She taught me everything about her business," she said. "Luna, sit down," my father said quietly. "No." I turned to the lawyer. "There has to be another document. Maybe an older person will. This doesn't make sense." Edward Hartwell finally looked at me directly. "Miss Martin, I assure you this is the current and valid will. Your grandmother was of sound mind when she made these decisions 2 years ago. 2 years ago. When Grandma Dorothy was still healthy, still herself. I thought back to that time I'd been visiting her every week, helping her organize the company's archives, and listening to her stories about building the business from nothing. She'd seemed happy. She'd never mentioned changing her will. Why?" I asked, looking at my parents. "Did you know about this?" My mother shifted in her seat. "Your grandmother made her own choices, Luna. We didn't influence her." "That's not what I asked." Rachel finally spoke, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "Luna, I know this is hard, but Grandma Dorothy and I reconnected before she died. We worked through our past issues. She saw that I'd matured, that I'd learned from my mistakes. She placed her hand on the documents. She wanted someone responsible to handle her legacy. Someone responsible." The words hit like a slap. I'd been the responsible one my whole life, working 2 jobs to pay rent, never asking my parents for money, visiting Grandma Dorothy every single week even when I was exhausted. Rachel had been the one who disappeared, who only showed up when she needed something. "I'd like to see her," I said to the lawyer. "The signature, the date, everything." Edward Hartwell hesitated, then slid a document across the table. There it was, my grandmother's shaky signature, dated January 2023. 2 years ago, like he'd said. But something felt wrong. The signature was right, but the handwriting in the margins, the initials, they looked different from other documents I'd seen her sign. "Miss Martin," Edward said, his voice gentler now, "I understand your disappointment. Your grandmother did leave you something." He pulled out a small envelope. "A personal letter and a sum of $10,000 to help with any immediate needs. $10,000 out of an $8.3 million estate, and a letter." I took the envelope with numb fingers. Around me, I could hear Edward Hartwell explaining trust structures and tax implications to Rachel. I heard my mother saying something about family dinners and staying close. I heard my father mention that I should be grateful for what I received, but all I could think about was Grandma Dorothy's face the last time I saw her. 6 months and 3 days ago. She'd held my hand and said, "Luna, baby, you're going to be just fine. Better than fine. You're going to show everyone what you're made of." This wasn't fine. This was a nightmare. "I need some air," I said, standing up so fast my chair nearly fell over. "Luna," my mother started. "No." I grabbed my purse and the envelope. "I need to leave." I made it to the hallway before the tears started. I stood there, back against the wall, trying to breathe, trying to understand how my whole world had just collapsed. The grandmother who raised me, who believed in me, had left everything to the cousin who'd barely spoken to her in years. "Miss Martin?" I looked up. Edward Hartwell was standing a few feet away, and he was alone. "I need you to stay," he said quietly. "After the others leave, there's something we need to discuss. Something important. What could possibly be important right now?" I asked, wiping my eyes. He glanced back toward the conference room, then looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. "Just trust me. Wait in the lobby. Give them 10 minutes to leave, then come back to my office. 3rd floor. Room 301. Before I could respond, he walked back toward the conference room, leaving me standing there confused and heartbroken, holding an envelope that felt like the final insult from the person I'd loved most in this world. I sat in the lobby for exactly 12 minutes, watching the elevator doors. My parents emerged first, my mother's heels clicking against the marble floor. They walked right past me like I was invisible. Then Rachel, phone pressed to her ear, already talking about liquidating assets and market valuations. She didn't even glance my way. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. The envelope from Grandma Dorothy burned in my hands. I hadn't opened it yet. Part of me didn't want to. What if her letter confirmed everything? What if she really had decided I wasn't worth her legacy? When the lobby finally emptied, I took the elevator to the 3rd floor. The hallway was quieter here, lined with individual offices instead of conference rooms. Brass nameplates marked each door: Catherine Powell, Estate Planning; James Thornton, Trust Management. And at the end of the hall, Edward Hartwell, Senior Partner. I knocked. "Come in, Miss Martin." His office was different from the conference room, warmer somehow. Bookshelves crammed with legal volumes, photos of what looked like grandchildren on his desk, a worn leather chair that had seen decades of use. Edward Hartwell sat behind his desk, but he wasn't alone. A woman in her 40s stood by the window, arms crossed. She had sharp eyes and an air of authority that made me straighten my posture instinctively. She wore a gray pantsuit and minimal jewelry, all business. "Luna, this is Victoria Chen, our firm's chief investigator and compliance officer," Edward said. "Please, sit." "Investigator?" My legs felt weak as I sank into the chair. "Am I in some kind of trouble?" "No," Victoria said, her voice surprisingly kind. "But we need to ask you some questions, and we need you to be completely honest with us." Edward leaned forward, folding his hands on his desk. "What I'm about to tell you cannot leave this room. Not yet. Do you understand?" I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. "How much do you know about your grandmother's business operations over the last 5 years?" The question threw me. I know Campbell Textiles was struggling. The textile industry isn't what it used to be. Grandma Dorothy was trying to pivot to sustainable fabrics, but it was expensive. She talked to me about it sometimes. "Did she ever mention other investments?" Victoria asked. "Properties? Ventures outside the textile business?" "No. I mean, I knew about the Cape Cod and Martha's Vineyard houses, but business-wise, it was always just the textile company." Edward and Victoria exchanged a look. "Miss Martin," Edward said carefully, "your grandmother was a remarkably shrewd businesswoman. Much more than most people realized." He pulled out a different folder, this one significantly thicker than the will documents. 6 years ago, Dorothy Campbell quietly began diversifying. She bought commercial properties in downtown Boston. She invested in tech startups. She acquired shares in several private companies. He paused. "Including this law firm." My brain couldn't process what he was saying. "She owned part of this firm?" "Not quite," Victoria said. "She owned the controlling interest, 65% to be exact, which made her our primary stakeholder." The room spun. "But that doesn't make sense. Why would she own a law firm?" "She ran a textile company. Because Dorothy Campbell was preparing for something," Edward said. "She came to me 7 years ago with concerns about your family. Specifically, about your parents' financial situation." Ice flooded my veins. "What about their financial situation?" Victoria pulled out a tablet and turned it toward me. I saw bank statements, investment accounts, credit reports. "Your parents have been in serious debt for the past decade. Bad investments, overspending, trying to maintain an appearance they couldn't afford. They owe approximately $740,000 to various creditors." I stared at the numbers. My parents had always seemed comfortable: the nice house in Newton, my dad's expensive suits, the country club membership. But I'd never questioned it. I'd been too busy working my own 2 jobs to keep my studio apartment. "Your grandmother knew," Edward continued. "She'd loaned them money multiple times over the years. They never paid her back. So she started protecting her assets, making sure that when she died, her estate wouldn't be absorbed by your parents' debts or poor decisions." "Then why give everything to Rachel?" The words came out bitter. "She's worse with money than my parents ever were." "That," Victoria said, "is the question we've been asking ourselves." Edward stood and walked to his window, looking out over Boston Harbor. 2 years ago, your grandmother came to me with a new will. She wanted to leave everything to Rachel Brennan. I strongly advised against it. I'd witnessed Rachel's behavior over the years, the borrowing, the failed businesses, the estrangement. But Dorothy insisted. She said it was what needed to happen. I don't understand. Neither did I, Edward admitted. Until 3 months ago, when I received this. He handed me a sealed envelope, different from the one I'd been given earlier. This one had my name written in Grandma Dorothy's handwriting, but underneath it said, "To be opened by Luna Martin only after the will reading. Private." My hands shook as I broke the seal. Inside was a single page, dated 8 months ago, just 1 month before Grandma Dorothy died. My dearest Luna, if you're reading this, then you've just watched me give everything to Rachel. I can only imagine how betrayed you feel, and for that, I am deeply sorry. But I need you to trust me one more time. Rachel is not who she appears to be. Neither are your parents. Over the past 3 years, I've discovered things about our family that broke my heart. Financial manipulation, lies, plans to contest my will and seize assets they have no right to. I couldn't let that happen, so I created a test. The will you saw today is real, but it's not the whole truth. I've set up a series of legal structures, trusts, corporations, holdings that protect the real assets. Rachel thinks she's inheriting my estate, but what she's actually inheriting is a carefully constructed shell. The textile company she's receiving is $2 million in debt. The investment portfolio is mostly illiquid assets she can't touch without triggering massive tax penalties. The properties are leveraged to their maximum value. In short, I've given her exactly what she deserves, the appearance of wealth with none of the substance. But you, my darling Luna, I've given you something far more valuable, something that will reveal itself in time. Edward Hartwell will explain everything, but only when he's certain you're ready and that you understand what I've done. Trust him. Trust yourself. And remember, you are the only one who ever really saw me for who I was. I'm returning the favor. All my love. Grandma Dorothy. I read it 3 times, my hands shaking harder with each pass. When I finally looked up, both Edward and Victoria were watching me carefully. I don't understand, I whispered. What did she give me? Edward sat back down, his expression grave. Before I answer that, I need to ask you something crucial. The $10,000 your grandmother left you in the official will that was deposited into your account this morning. Have you checked your bank balance lately? No, I've been here since. Check it now. Confused, I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. The screen is loaded. I expected to see my usual $600, maybe $10,000. $600 now with the inheritance deposit. Instead, the number read $847,293.16. My phone nearly slipped from my hands. That, Victoria said, is the beginning of your real inheritance, but it's also the first test. Because the moment you withdrew or spent that money differently than expected, we'd know whether Dorothy's faith in you was justified. Edward leaned forward. Luna, your grandmother didn't just leave you money. She left you a choice. And depending on what you decide in the next few days, you'll either walk away wealthy but uninvolved, or you'll step into something much bigger than you ever imagined. What do you mean? He slid a business card across his desk. It was made of heavy cream cardstock with embossed lettering, Hartwell and Associates, Corporate Restructuring Division. But it was the name beneath the firm title that made my heart stop. Luna Martin, principal shareholder, your grandmother, Edward said, quietly, didn't leave you this law firm in her will. She didn't have to. She transferred ownership to you 3 years ago through a series of trusts and corporate structures that only became active upon her death. As of 6 a.m. this morning, you own 65% of Hartwell and Associates. You're not just an heir, Miss Martin. You're my boss. The room tilted. I gripped the edge of his desk, trying to breathe. But there's a complication, Victoria added. Your parents don't know. Rachel doesn't know. And if they find out before we've secured certain legal protections, they can challenge the transfers, tie everything up in court for years, and potentially bankrupt both you and this firm in the process. Edward's expression was deadly serious. So here's what I need to know, Luna. Are you ready to fight for what your grandmother built? Because the moment you say yes, everything changes. Your family will become your adversaries. Rachel will realize she's been tricked, and you'll have to prove that. Dorothy Campbell was right to trust you with her real legacy. I looked down at the card in my hands, at the impossible words printed there. Luna Martin, principal shareholder. How long do I have to decide? I asked. 72 hours, Victoria said. After that, certain legal deadlines expire, and we'll have to disclose the ownership transfer. If you're not ready to defend it by then. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. I thought about my grandmother's letter. About the $847,000 in my bank account. About my parents walking past me like I didn't exist. About Rachel's smug smile as she claimed an inheritance she didn't deserve. But most of all, I thought about Grandma Dorothy, spending her final years building this elaborate plan to protect me and test everyone else. She'd believed I was strong enough for this. The question was, did I believe it? I need to understand everything, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Every detail, every risk, every option. Edward smiled, the first real smile I'd seen from him all day. That's exactly what your grandmother said you'd say. Victoria, clear my schedule for the rest of the day. He pulled out another thick folder, this one marked Confidential, Campbell Holdings. Let's begin, he said. Because what I'm about to show you is going to change everything you thought you knew about Dorothy Campbell and about yourself. Edward spread documents across his desk, like he was laying out a roadmap to a hidden Noonan tree. World. Financial statements, corporate structures, property deeds, each page revealing another layer of my grandmother's secret life. Campbell Textiles. Edward began. Was always the public face. What people saw, what your family thought, was her entire business. But Dorothy was building something else entirely. Victoria pulled up a digital presentation on a large monitor mounted to the wall. A flowchart appeared, so complex it looked like a spider's web. At the center, Dorothy Campbell, radiating outward, dozens of companies, trusts, and holdings. In 2018, your grandmother sold 40% of Campbell Textiles to a Chinese manufacturing conglomerate for $12 million, Victoria explained. Everyone thought she was struggling, downsizing. In reality, she was cashing out before the textile market collapsed further. She took that money, Edward continued, and invested it in Boston real estate. Not houses, commercial buildings, office spaces in the financial district. That portfolio is now worth $31 million. The number felt abstract, impossible. I couldn't wrap my mind around it. Then there's Hartwell and Associates, Edward said, gesturing around his office. She bought her stake in 2019 for $8 million. The firm is now valued at $47 million, which means her 65% share your share is worth approximately $30.5 million. My vision blurred. I gripped the armrests of my chair. Victoria clicked to the next slide. But the real genius was what she did with tech investments. Your grandmother attended a venture capital seminar in 2020, said she wanted to understand what her grandchildren's generation valued. She started small, investing in early-stage startups. Most failed. But 3 succeeded spectacularly. A company name appeared on screen, Next Gen Solutions, cybersecurity firm. She invested $500,000 in 2020. It went public last year. Her shares are currently worth $8.2 million. Another slide. Data stream analytics, cloud computing. $300,000 initial investment, now worth $4.7 million. And the crown jewel, Edward said, his voice dropping. Biogenics Pharmaceuticals. She invested $1 million in 2019 when they were developing a new treatment for autoimmune disorders. FDA approval came through 4 months ago. Her stake is now valued at $23 million. I couldn't breathe. The numbers kept climbing, kept compounding, kept revealing a grandmother I'd never truly known. In total, Victoria said, pulling up a final spreadsheet, Dorothy Campbell's actual net worth at the time of her death was approximately $94 million. Not the $8.3 million listed in the will your family saw. $94 million, I repeated, the words feeling foreign in my mouth. And that's conservative, Edward added. Some of these valuations could increase significantly in the next few years. I stood up, needing to move, to process. I walked to the window overlooking Boston Harbor, watching boats cut through dark water. Why didn't she tell me? We talked about everything. She knew I was struggling to pay rent. She watched me work 2 jobs. Because she was testing you, Victoria said gently. She needed to know you could handle struggle, that you wouldn't become entitled or careless with money. She watched you choose integrity over comfort every single day. Edward opened another folder. Meanwhile, she was watching your parents sink deeper into debt, watching Rachel burn through every opportunity she was given. Your grandmother was brilliant, Luna, but she was also ruthless when she needed to be. The fake inheritance, I said, turning back to them. The one Rachel thinks she's getting. You said it was worthless? Strategic worthlessness, Victoria corrected. She pulled up another document. The Campbell Textiles shares Rachel is inheriting? The company is $2 million in debt and losing money quarterly. The properties in Cape Cod and Martha's Vineyard? Mortgaged to 95% of their value, with balloon payments coming due that Rachel can't possibly afford. The investment portfolio is a mix of illiquid assets and underperforming stocks that would trigger massive tax penalties if sold. Your grandmother essentially created a financial trap, Edward said. Rachel will think she's wealthy for about 6 months. Then the debt payments will start coming due. The properties will require expensive maintenance she can't afford. The textile company will need capital infusions to stay afloat. Within a year, she'll be drowning. I trailed off, unsure if I should say cruel or brilliant. It's justice, Victoria said firmly. Rachel has a history of exploiting people, of taking what she hasn't earned. Your grandmother gave her exactly what she deserves, a lesson in consequences. Edward pulled out yet another document, this one bound in blue legal backing. But here's where it gets complicated. Your parents have already made moves. My stomach dropped. What kind of moves? This morning, 2 hours after the will reading, your father contacted 3 different law firms about contesting Dorothy's estate, Victoria said, showing me time-stamped emails. He's claiming undue influence, questioning your grandmother's mental capacity, and suggesting that Rachel manipulated an elderly woman. But the will gives everything to Rachel, I said, confused. Why would they contest it? Because they're planning to position themselves as Rachel's advisors, Edward explained. Your mother has already offered to help Rachel manage the estate. Your father is suggesting they form a family trust with him as trustee. They're trying to get control of the assets through the back door. The calculation was breathtaking. My parents had planned this. There's more, Victoria said grimly. We've been monitoring Rachel's communications legally, through the firm's interest in the estate. She received a call 30 minutes after leaving here. From your brother, Travis. Travis? My younger brother was a junior associate at some corporate law firm in New York. We barely spoke anymore. What does he have to do with this? Victoria played an audio recording. My brother's voice, sharp and excited. Rachel, it's Travis. Listen, I've been looking at tax law implications for large inheritances. I think I can help you minimize exposure if you're willing to cut me in for a consulting fee. Say, 10% of the liquid assets? My mouth fell open. Your entire family, Edward said quietly, is circling what they think is a fortune. They're already fighting over it, planning how to carve it up among themselves. And none of them included you in those plans. The hurt was sharp and immediate. I'd known my family underestimated me, but hearing the evidence of their complete dismissal cut deep. Here's the critical part, Victoria said, her tone shifting to urgent. In 72 hours, we have to file disclosure documents with the Massachusetts Secretary of State revealing the corporate ownership transfers. That's when your parents and Rachel will discover that Dorothy's real assets, the ones they're all scheming to access, are actually controlled by you. They'll come after me, I said. With everything they have, Edward confirmed. Your parents will claim you manipulated Dorothy. Rachel will sue for fraud. Travis will probably try to find some legal technicality to invalidate the transfers. It will be ugly, expensive, and very public. Unless, Victoria said, we prepare first. We have 72 hours to build an unshakable legal defense. Character witnesses who can testify to your relationship with Dorothy. Financial experts who can document your parents' debt and desperation. Paper trails showing Rachel's history of failed ventures and exploitation. Edward leaned forward. We can win this, Luna, but only if you're ready to fight. And only if you understand that winning means your family will never forgive you. I thought about my mother's cold dismissal in the lobby, my father's refusal to meet my eyes, Rachel's smug smile. Travis is already trying to profit off what he thought was Rachel's inheritance. They'd already cut me out. They'd done it years ago, probably. I'd just been too hopeful to see it. What do you need me to do? I asked. Victoria smiled the first time I'd seen her express any emotion. First, we need you to document everything you can remember about your grandmother. Every conversation about her business, every piece of advice she gave you, every moment that proves you had a genuine relationship built on mutual respect. Second, Edward said, we need you to make a choice about Campbell Textiles. You technically own the remaining 60% of the company through a separate trust. That means you control it. The question is, do we let it fail and take Rachel down with it, or do you try to save it? The question hung in the air. Saving the textile company would mean throwing money at a dying industry. But it had been my grandmother's first business, the foundation of everything else. Could I really let it collapse just to teach Rachel a lesson? Third, Victoria added, you need to prepare yourself for what happens when this goes public. The media will be interested. A 8-year-old bookkeeper who secretly inherited a $94 million empire. That's a story. Your family will try to paint you as a villain. You'll need to be ready. Edward stood and walked around his desk, extending his hand. So, I'll ask you again, Miss Martin. Are you ready to fight for what your grandmother built? Because once we start this, there's no going back. I looked at his outstretched hand. 72 hours ago, I'd been a bookkeeper living paycheck to paycheck, hoping for a small inheritance that might help me finally save up for a security deposit on a better apartment. Now I was standing in a law office I apparently owned, learning I controlled a fortune, facing a war with my entire family. My grandmother had believed I could handle this. She'd built this elaborate structure to protect me and to test everyone else. She'd trusted me with her legacy. The question was, could I trust myself? I took Edward's hand. His grip was firm, steady. 72 hours, I said. Let's build a case they can't break. Victoria began typing immediately, pulling up files and creating task lists. Edward returned to his desk, already on the phone with someone, mentioning terms like forensic accounting and witness depositions. I sat back down, my mind reeling, but my decision was made. Whatever happened next, I was done being invisible, done being dismissed, done letting my family treat me like I didn't matter. My grandmother had given me more than money. She'd given me a chance to finally show everyone, including myself, who I really was, and I wasn't going to waste it. The first thing Victoria made me do was turn off my phone. Your family will start calling soon, she said, sliding a new device across the conference table. They'll want to celebrate with Rachel, play happy family. Make sure you're not suspicious. Use this burner phone for the next 72 hours. Only Edward and I have the number. It was 2 p.m. We'd been in Edward's office for 4 hours straight. My head throbbed from information overload, my throat was dry, and I'd chewed through 3 pens without realizing it. Let's start with the easy part, Edward said, opening his laptop. Your grandmother kept meticulous records, every conversation she had with family members over the past 5 years was documented, dates, times, topics discussed. She even recorded some of them. Recorded? The word felt invasive. Why would she do that? Victoria pulled up a database on her tablet. Because she knew this day would come. She knew your parents would challenge everything. So she built evidence, piece by piece, proving she was of sound mind and that her decisions were deliberate. She clicked on a file dated March 2023, exactly 2 years ago. My grandmother's voice filled the room, clear and strong despite her age. Edward, I need this on record. Patricia called me again today, asking for money. That's the 4th time this month. She's claiming Richard's business is about to collapse without an immediate infusion of $200,000. I told her no. She got angry, said I was being selfish, that I owed them after everything they'd done for me. Everything they'd done for me. as if raising my own son was a favor they performed. The recording continued. I heard my mother's voice in the background, sharp and demanding. Then my grandmother again. This is why Luna gets everything. She's never asked me for a dime. Works herself to exhaustion rather than burden anyone. That's strength, Edward. That's integrity. I hadn't realized I was crying until Victoria handed me a tissue. There are 47 recordings like this, Edward said gently, all documenting various family members asking for money, making demands, showing their true nature. Your grandmother was building a case for years. Did she record me too? I asked, unsure if I wanted the answer. Victoria nodded. Want to hear one? Before I could respond, she played a file from July 2024, 3 months before Grandma Dorothy died. Luna came by today with groceries. Didn't ask. Just showed up knowing I hate shopping. We spent 3 hours going through old textile samples from the 1,970 seconds. She asked such smart questions about supply chains, labor costs, sustainability. Not because she wanted anything, but because she genuinely cared about understanding the work I'd built. My grandmother's voice wavered slightly, emotion breaking through. I told her I was proud of her. She actually seemed surprised, like she wasn't used to hearing it. That broke my heart, Edward. Her own parents never tell her she matters. But she does. She matters more than all of them combined. The recording ended. The office fell silent. Your grandmother saw you clearly, Edward said. That's why we're going to win this. Victoria stood abruptly. But we need more than recordings. We need to understand exactly what your family is planning. Edward, do we have authorization for financial monitoring? He nodded. Went active this morning. Any unusual transactions or communications regarding the estate will be flagged. What does that mean? I asked. It means, Victoria explained, we're watching their bank accounts. Legally, since the estate is still in probate and there are concerns about asset dissipation, we can monitor financial activity related to Dorothy's assets. And what we're seeing is very interesting. She pulled up a screen showing real-time transaction data. Your father withdrew $15,000 from his personal account 2 hours ago. Cash withdrawal. No electronic trail. Lawyer retainer, Edward said immediately. He's hiring someone off the books, probably someone who specializes in estate challenges. Your mother, Victoria continued, made 3 calls to appraisal companies. She's trying to get independent valuations of Dorothy's properties, which means she doesn't trust the figures in the official will. Smart, Edward muttered. She suspects something. My heart raced. What about Rachel? Victoria's expression darkened. Rachel is the most interesting. She made a cash deposit of $5,000 into her account this morning, source unknown. Then she purchased a first-class ticket to Miami, leaving tomorrow night. Miami? Nothing about that made sense. We're tracking it, Victoria said. But it suggests she's planning something. Maybe moving assets quickly. Maybe meeting with someone we don't know about yet. Edward checked his watch. We have 68 hours left. Victoria, I need you to pull every financial document on the Martin family going back 10 years. Bank statements, credit reports, tax returns, everything we can legally access. I want to know every debt, every failed investment, every shady transaction. Already started. She replied. I should have a preliminary report by tonight. Good. He turned to me. Luna, I need you to do something difficult. Go home. Act normal. If your family calls, answer. Be sad, be disappointed, but don't be angry. We need them to think you're defeated, not dangerous. You want me to pretend everything's fine? I want you to be invisible, Edward said. Just like you've always been to them. Let them think you're the same. Luna struggling, insignificant, easily dismissed. Meanwhile, we'll be building a fortress around you that they can't penetrate. Victoria handed me the burner phone and a folder. Inside are talking points. If your parents ask about the will, here's what you say. If Rachel tries to gloat, here's how you respond. Stay on script. Don't improvise. One wrong word could tip them off. I took the folder, feeling like a spy in my own life. There's one more thing, Edward said, his tone shifting. We found something in your grandmother's papers that we need you to verify. It's sensitive. He slid a photograph across the desk. It showed my father and Rachel at a restaurant, leaning close together, clearly deep in conversation. The timestamp read December 2024, 2 months ago. Before your grandmother died, Victoria said, she hired a private investigator. She suspected your father and Rachel were coordinating something. We have 6 photographs from 3 different meetings, all happening while Rachel was supposedly estranged from the family. The implications hit me like cold water. They were planning this together. The reconciliation with Grandma Dorothy, Rachel suddenly being back in her life, it was all staged. We believe so. Edward confirmed. Your father needed a proxy, someone who could get close to Dorothy without raising suspicion. Rachel needed money. They made a deal. And my mother? Probably knew, Victoria said. There's an email from your mother to Rachel dated 4 months ago. Subject line, strategy for approach. The body of the email was deleted, but the subject line alone suggests coordination. My family hadn't just abandoned me. They'd actively conspired against my grandmother, manipulated her, used her vulnerability against her. The betrayal was so complete, so calculated, that it almost didn't feel real. Does Grandma Dorothy know about this? I asked. Did she know they were manipulating her? Edward opened one final recording, my grandmother's voice, dated just 6 weeks before her death. Edward, I'm not a fool. I know what they're doing. Richard thinks he's clever, using Rachel as his puppet. Patricia thinks I don't see through her sudden interest in my health. But I've been in business for 60 years. I recognize a con when I see one. A pause then. Let them think they're winning. Let them believe I'm too old to understand their games. Because when the truth comes out, when they realize Luna has everything and they have nothing but debt and consequences, that's when they'll finally understand. You can't cheat someone who's been preparing for your betrayal all along. The recording ended with my grandmother's soft laugh, not cruel, just knowing. She knew, I whispered. Everything. She knew and she planned for it. Which is why our case is airtight, Edward said. But we still need to execute perfectly. Victoria, coordinate with our forensic accountants. I want a complete analysis of the Martin family finances by morning. Luna, go home. Rest if you can. Tomorrow we start building your public defense. I stood on shaky legs. The burner phone felt heavy in my pocket. The folder of talking points felt like a script for a play I'd never auditioned for. One more thing, Victoria said as I reached the door. Your grandmother left you a video message. It's scheduled to become accessible exactly 72 hours after the will reading. That means you'll receive it tomorrow at 10 a.m. Watch it alone. She wanted it to be private. A video message. Even from beyond the grave, my grandmother was still guiding me, still leaving breadcrumbs. I nodded and left the office, walking through the empty corridors of a law firm I owned but had never really seen. The marble floors gleamed under expensive lighting. The brass nameplates announced lawyers whose salaries I apparently paid. The whole building hummed with quiet power. This was mine, all of it. But ownership meant nothing if I couldn't defend it. I stepped out into the late afternoon sun. Boston's streets were crowded with people, heading home from work, living normal lives, dealing with normal problems. None of them knew that the tired-looking woman in the thrift store blazer walking past them was worth $94 million and about to go to war with her entire family. My real phone, the one I'd turned off hours ago, sat heavy in my purse. I knew what I'd find when I turned it back on. Messages from my mother, calls from my father, maybe even a gloating text from Rachel. But not yet. For now, I just walked, one foot in front of the other, breathing, preparing. The battle hadn't started yet, but in 68 hours, everything would explode. And I needed to be ready. My studio apartment had never felt smaller. I sat on my second-hand couch staring at my old phone, still powered off, still holding whatever messages waited inside. The burner phone Victoria gave me sat next to it, silent, waiting. It was 7 p.m. I'd been home for 2 hours, unable to eat, unable to think about anything except what Edward had said. Act normal. Be invisible. Let them think you're defeated. I could do that. I'd been doing that my whole life. I turned on my regular phone. It exploded with notifications. 17 missed calls, 23 text messages, 4 voicemails. My mother. Luna. Call me immediately. We need to discuss family matters. My father. Your mother and I would like to take you to dinner tomorrow, 7 p.m., Donovan's Steakhouse. Don't be late. Rachel, surprisingly. Hey, no hard feelings about the will, right? Grandma made her choice. Hope we can still be family. That last one made my skin crawl. No hard feelings. Like she hadn't just stolen what should have been mine or what she thought she'd stolen. I opened the folder Victoria had given me and found the script for responding to family contact. The instructions were clear. Short responses. Emotions, not details. Compliance, not resistance. I texted my mother. Okay, I'll call tomorrow. Just need some time to process. My father. Dinner sounds. Fine. See you then. Rachel. Of course. Family is family. Each message felt like swallowing glass, but I sent them. Then I waited. The burner phone rang within minutes. Victoria. Good, she said without preamble. You followed the script. Now listen carefully. Your father made another cash withdrawal an hour ago. $8,000 this time. We traced him to a private investigator's office in Cambridge. He hired a PI? To investigate you, Victoria said. He's looking for anything he can use: financial irregularities, personal problems, anything that might suggest you're unstable or manipulated Dorothy somehow. Probably building a case in advance for when they discover the real transfers. My hands went cold. What will they find? Nothing, Victoria said firmly. You're clean, Luna. You pay your taxes, you work legitimate jobs, you have no criminal record. You're the most boring investigation target in Massachusetts. Which is exactly what we want. What about tomorrow's dinner? Where? A wire. The words hung in the air. You can't be serious. Completely serious, Victoria replied. Massachusetts is a one-party consent state, meaning as long as you're part of the conversation, you can legally record it. Your parents will say things tomorrow night they always do when they think they have the upper hand. We need that evidence. They're my parents, I said, even though the words felt hollow. They're co-conspirators in a fraud scheme, Victoria corrected. And they're about to try manipulating you. We need documentation. I looked around my tiny apartment, the place I'd worked 2 jobs to afford. The place my parents had visited exactly twice in 3 years because it wasn't in a good neighborhood. They'd never offered to help with rent, never suggested I deserved better. Okay, I said, I'll do it. Someone will deliver the equipment tomorrow at noon. It's small, virtually undetectable. Just relax and let them talk. People always reveal themselves when they think they're in control. After she hung up, I sat in the dark wondering who I was becoming. 24 hours ago, I'd been a bookkeeper who visited her grandmother every week and hoped for a small inheritance. Now I was planning to secretly record my own parents. But they'd recorded their conversations with Grandma Dorothy. They'd schemed with Rachel, hired private investigators, and withdrawn suspicious amounts of cash. They'd started this war years ago. I was just finally fighting back. The next morning came too fast. I barely slept, every noise in my building making me jump. At 11:45 a.m., someone knocked on my door, a courier with a small package addressed to L.M. Inside was a device no bigger than a button, instructions for placement, and a note from Victoria. Clip to your bra strap, left side. The battery lasts 6 hours. Press once to start recording, twice to stop. Transmits directly to us in real time. You're not alone in this. At 6:30 p.m., I stood outside Donovan's Steakhouse wearing the only dress I owned that seemed appropriate, a black wrap dress I'd bought for a job interview 2 years ago. The wire pressed against my ribs, a constant reminder of what I was about to do. I pressed it once. A tiny vibration confirmed it was recording. Inside, Donovan's was all dark wood and leather booths, the kind of place where business deals happened over $200 steaks. My parents were already seated at a corner table, my father in his expensive suit, my mother dripping in jewelry I now suspected they couldn't actually afford. "Luna, darling," my mother said, standing to kiss my cheek. Her perfume was overwhelming. "You look tired. Are you eating enough?" The fake concern was almost impressive. I slid into the booth across from them. "I'm fine. Just been a tough few days." "Of course it has," my father said, signaling the waiter. Let's order drinks first. You look like you need one. They ordered wine, expensive bottles I couldn't pronounce. I asked for water. My mother's smile tightened slightly at that, but she didn't comment. So, my father began once the waiter left. We wanted to check in with you. See how you're handling everything with Dorothy's will. I'm disappointed, I said, sticking to the script. I thought Grandma and I were close. You were close, my mother interjected quickly. But you have to understand, your grandmother wasn't herself those last few years. The dementia, the confusion. She didn't have dementia, I said carefully. She was sharp until the end. My father waved dismissively. That's what we all wanted to believe. But the doctors saw signs. Memory problems, poor judgment. It's why she made such an irrational decision with her will. There it was. They were already laying groundwork to challenge Dorothy's mental capacity. Rachel seemed pretty happy, I said, taking a sip of water. My mother leaned forward, her expression shifting to conspiratorial. Between us, honey, I don't think Rachel is prepared for what she's inherited, managing that much money, those properties, the business decisions. It's overwhelming. Your father and I have offered to help her. Help her how? Advise her, my father said smoothly. I have experience with estate management. We're thinking of setting up a family trust, pooling resources, making sure everything is handled properly. Translation. They wanted control of Rachel's inheritance so they could pay off their own debts. Where do I fit in? I asked, playing naive. My parents exchanged a glance. My mother reached across the table and took my hand. Sweetheart, we know the will was hurtful. But family takes care of family. If you're willing to work with us, to be part of this trust structure, we can make sure you're provided for. Maybe a monthly stipend? Help with your rent. How much? I asked. My father smiled like I'd passed a test. We're thinking $2,000 a month. More than enough to cover your expenses and give you some breathing room. $24,000 a year, out of what they thought was an $8.3 million estate. They were offering me crumbs and expecting gratitude. In exchange for what? I pressed. Just your cooperation, my mother said quickly. If we need you to sign some documents, support some legal filings, nothing complicated. Just showing family unity. They wanted me to be complicit. They wanted my signature on whatever challenge they were planning and wanted me to rubber stamp their takeover of Rachel's inheritance. I'd need to think about it, I said. Of course, my father replied. Take your time. But Luna, understand something, this is the best offer you're going to get. The will is clear. Rachel inherited everything. Your grandmother left you $10,000. That's it. We're trying to help you. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Take this deal, or get nothing. Our food arrived, steaks for my parents, salmon for me. We ate mostly in silence, the tension thick enough to cut. My mother made small talk about the weather, about my father's work, about everything except the elephant in the room. Then, as dessert arrived, my father dropped his voice. There's something else you should know. Your brother Travis has some concerns about the will. He's looking into it professionally. Concerns about what? Irregularities, my mother said carefully. Signatures that don't quite match samples, dates that seem suspicious. If Travis finds something and he's very thorough, the whole will could be challenged. Which means everything would go into probate for years. They were threatening to tie up the estate, to make Rachel's life hell, unless I cooperated with their plans. Why are you telling me this? I asked. My father leaned back, studying me. Because you're smart enough to see where this is going. Rachel gets the inheritance, but she'll be drowning in legal fees and challenges within months. Your mother and I get dragged into expensive litigation trying to sort everything out. You get nothing either way. Unless we work together, my mother finished. Unless we present a unified family front. Tell the courts we all agree Dorothy wasn't in her right mind, that we all want a fair redistribution of assets. There it was, the full plan. They wanted me to help them steal from Rachel, who they'd used as a proxy to steal from Dorothy, so they could pay off the debts that had driven them to scheme in the first place. It was almost elegant in its corruption. I need to use the restroom, I said, standing abruptly. In the bathroom, I pressed the wire twice, stopping the recording. Then I pulled out the burner phone and texted Victoria. Got it. Everything. They just confessed to planning fraud. Her response came immediately. Perfect. Get out of there. You've given us everything we need. 53 hours left. I returned to the table, grabbed my purse, and looked at my parents. I'm not feeling well. I need to go. My mother's face hardened. Luna, sit down. We're not finished. I am, I said quietly. Thanks for dinner. I walked out of Donovan's steakhouse with their confused protests following me. Outside, the cool night air hit my face, and I realized I was shaking not from fear, but from rage. They'd offered me $2,000 a month like I was a child who needed an allowance. They'd plotted to destroy my grandmother's wishes. They'd assumed I was too weak, too desperate, too insignificant to be anything but grateful for their crumbs. In 53 hours, they'd learn exactly how wrong they were. My grandmother hadn't just given me an inheritance. She'd given me the evidence and the resources to make sure people like them, people who took and schemed and manipulated, finally faced consequences. And I was going to use every bit of it. I woke up at 9:47 a.m. to the burner phone buzzing. Victoria's text read, "Video message unlocks in 13 minutes. Check your email. Private viewing only." My laptop sat on my kitchen counter, already open. I made coffee with shaking hands, watching the clock tick toward 10 a.m. At 9:59, an email arrived from an automated system. Secure video message from Dorothy Campbell. Password required. The password was written in my grandmother's letter, Luna Slight. I typed it in. The screen went black, then my grandmother's face appeared. She was sitting in her study at the Beacon Hill house, sunlight streaming through the windows behind her. This had been filmed recently, maybe a month before she died. She looked frail, but her eyes were sharp, focused. "Hello, my darling Luna," she began, and I immediately started crying. "If you're watching this, then you've made it through the will reading. You've met with Edward and Victoria. And you're probably feeling scared, angry, and betrayed by everyone you thought you could trust." She smiled softly. "I'm sorry for putting you through this. But I needed to know you could handle pressure before I gave you access to real power. Wealth without wisdom is dangerous. Power without integrity is destructive. I had to test you." She adjusted her reading glasses. "By now you know about the $94 million. You know about the law firm, the properties, the investments. But there's something else I haven't told you about. Something that will make everything else I've given you pale in comparison." My coffee went cold in my hands. In 2019, I invested in a little startup company called Quantum Edge Technologies. They were developing quantum computing processors, something I barely understood but knew was important. I put in $2 million when they were worth almost nothing. She paused. Last month, Apple announced they're acquiring Quantum Edge for $1.8 billion. My shares, Luna, are worth approximately $180 million. The room spun. $180 million, on top of everything else. "The acquisition will be finalized in 4 months, she continued. "Which means when you're fighting your family over the estate in probate, they'll have no idea this asset even exists. It's held in a separate corporate structure, completely invisible to the will they saw." She leaned closer to the camera. "That money is yours. All of it. Use it wisely. Build something that matters. Help people who need it. And never, ever let anyone make you feel small again." Her expression shifted and became more serious. "But I need to warn you about something. Rachel isn't who you think she is. Neither are your parents. There's a reason I chose Rachel as my heir in that fake will, and it wasn't random." She pulled out a folder, showing it to the camera. 6 years ago, Rachel came to me claiming she'd changed, wanting to rebuild our relationship. I believed her at first. But then I hired investigators and discovered the truth. Your father had put her up to it. He'd bribed her with $50,000 to get close to me, to gain my trust, to eventually manipulate me into leaving her everything so they could control it. Together. My stomach dropped. $50,000. My father had literally purchased Rachel's loyalty. "They thought they were so clever," my grandmother said, her voice hard. "They thought I was too old, too trusting to see through their scheme. So I played along. I pretended to fall for Rachel's act. I changed my will exactly as they wanted. And then I built a second layer underneath the real inheritance, hidden where they'd never think to look. She set down the folder. The Campbell Textiles shares Rachel inherited? They're worthless, buried in debt I purposely took on to make the company look like a burden. The properties? Mortgaged beyond their value. Even the jewelry collection I left her is mostly cubic zirconia. I sold the real pieces years ago to fund my tech investments. A laugh escaped me despite everything. My grandmother had created an elaborate trap, complete with fake jewels. In 48 hours, she continued, Edward will file the disclosure documents. Your family will discover the truth. They'll come after you with everything they have. They'll call you a liar, a manipulator, a thief. They'll try to paint me as senile. They'll drag you through the media, through the courts, through hell itself. She reached toward the camera, as if she could touch my face. But you're stronger than they know. You're smarter than they ever gave you credit for. And now you have resources they can't match. Fight them, Luna. Fight them with everything I've given you. Not for revenge, but for justice. Show them what happens when you underestimate someone. The video shifted. My grandmother was holding a glass of wine, more relaxed now. One more thing. I've left instructions with Edward about Campbell Textiles. The company is dying, yes, but it can be saved. There's a young designer named Marcus Webb who approached me 2 years ago with revolutionary sustainable textile ideas. I funded his research quietly through a subsidiary. His patents are worth millions, and they're owned by Campbell Textiles, which you control 60% of. She smiled. If you want to save the company, offer Webb the position of creative director. Give him resources and freedom. He'll turn Campbell Textiles into something extraordinary. Or, if you want to let it fail and watch Rachel drown in debt, that's your choice too. I won't judge either decision. The screen started to fade. My grandmother's final words were almost a whisper. I love you, Luna. I always have. I always will. Now go show them who you really are. The video ended. I sat there staring at the blank screen, tears streaming down my face. The burner phone rang. Edward. You watched it? He asked. Yes. Then you know about Quantum Edge. $180 million, I said, still not believing it. That's not in any of the estate documents. Because it's not technically part of the estate, Edward explained. It's held in a separate corporation that Dorothy transferred to you 5 years ago. Your family has no legal claim to it whatsoever. It's completely protected. I stood up, paced my tiny apartment. Why didn't you tell me yesterday? Because Dorothy wanted you to hear it from her. She wanted you to understand that this wasn't just about money, it was about her faith in you. Victoria's voice came through the speaker. She was on the call too. Luna, we need to talk about Marcus Webb. He's been calling the firm all morning asking about Campbell Textiles. He heard about Dorothy's death and he's worried about his patents. Set up a meeting, I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. Today, if possible. Already done, Victoria replied. He'll be at the office at 2 p.m. But there's something else. Rachel's flight to Miami? She canceled it last night. Instead, she drove to your parents' house in Newton. All 3 of them have been there for the past 12 hours. They're planning something, Edward said grimly. Let them plan, I said. We have 46 hours until disclosure. Have you finished analyzing the financial records? Yes, Victoria said. Your parents' debt is worse than we thought. $891,000 combined. Credit cards, personal loans, a second mortgage. They're drowning. And Rachel? She's been paying her bills with credit cards for 2 years. She's $127,000 in debt herself. The 3 of them together are over $1 million underwater. Now their desperation made perfect sense. They weren't just greedy, they were cornered. Dorothy's inheritance wasn't a windfall to them. It was survival. What about my brother Travis? I asked. Edward's voice darkened. Travis is the wild card. He's actually researching the will legitimately. He doesn't know about his parents' debt or Rachel's arrangement with your father. He genuinely thinks he's doing due diligence. So he's not part of the conspiracy? Not yet, Victoria said. But once he finds irregularities, which he will, because we planted some fake ones in the decoy, he'll report them. That's when things will explode. I checked the time, 10:47 a.m. I'm coming to the office. I want to meet Marcus Webb, review the Quantum Edge documents, and prepare for whatever my family throws at us. Are you sure? Edward asked. You could still walk away, Luna. Take the money, move somewhere far away, let the lawyers handle everything. I thought about my grandmother's face in that video. The way she'd smiled when she talked about me, showing everyone who I really was. I'm not walking away, I said. Not from this, not from her legacy. And definitely not from the fight. Then we'll see you in an hour, Victoria said. And Luna? Your grandmother would be proud of you. After they hung up, I stood in my apartment looking at my bookshelf, my secondhand furniture, my whole small life. In 46 hours, none of this would matter. I'd either be fighting the legal battle of my life or I'd be crushed by a family that had always treated me like I was nothing. But for the first time in my entire life, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. My grandmother hadn't just given me money, she'd given me purpose, and I wasn't going to waste it. Marcus Webb was nothing like I expected. Young, maybe 30, with paint-stained jeans and an energy that filled Edward's conference room. He laid fabric samples across the table, materials that felt like silk but were made from recycled ocean plastics. Your grandmother was the only person who believed in this, he said, his voice cracking slightly. Everyone else said sustainable textiles couldn't compete with fast fashion. But Dorothy saw the future. I ran my fingers over a sample that shimmered like liquid mercury. These patents, they're owned by Campbell Textiles? Every single one. Marcus confirmed. Dorothy insisted. She said she wanted them protected under an established company, not some startup that could be acquired and buried by competitors. Edward cleared his throat. Luna, if you appoint Marcus as creative director and invest in production, these patents could generate $50 million annually within 3 years. I looked at Marcus. Why did you really come here today? He met my eyes directly. Because Rachel Brennan's attorney called me yesterday, said she's planning to liquidate Campbell Textiles' assets to pay off debt. That includes selling my patents to the highest bidder, probably some corporation that will bury the technology to protect their existing products. My grandmother had known this would happen. She'd predicted Rachel's desperation, her short-term thinking. What if I told you Campbell Textiles isn't being liquidated? I said. Marcus's face lit up. Then I'd say, let's change the textile industry together. You're hired, I said. Full salary, full budget, full creative control. Make my grandmother proud. Victoria entered the room, her expression urgent. Luna, we have a problem. Your brother Travis just filed a motion with probate court. He's requesting an emergency hearing to freeze Dorothy's estate, pending an investigation into fraud. The deadline was still 38 hours away. They were moving early. What triggered it? Edward asked. The signatures? Victoria said. Travis compared the will to other documents Dorothy signed. He found discrepancies, the ones we deliberately planted in the decoy will. He thinks he's uncovered actual fraud. I felt strangely calm. So, the explosion is happening ahead of schedule. By a day and a half, Edward confirmed. Which means we need to move now. Victoria, file the disclosure documents immediately. Let's control this narrative before they do. Victoria was already on her phone, coordinating with the firm's filing department. Edward turned to me. In about 2 hours, the Massachusetts Secretary of State will publish corporate ownership transfers. Your name will appear as principal shareholder of Hartwell and Associates and controlling owner of multiple Campbell Holdings entities. The media will pick it up within hours. And my family will receive official notification by courier service, he said. They'll know before the press conference. Press conference? My voice cracked. We're calling one for 5 p.m. today, Victoria said, hanging up her phone. You're going to stand in front of cameras and explain that you've inherited your grandmother's business empire. We'll present the recordings, the financial documentation, everything. We'll show the world exactly who your family really is before they can spin their own version. The calm shattered into panic. I can't do that. I don't know how to. You're the principal shareholder of a major law firm, Edward said firmly. You control a $94 million estate. You're about to receive $180 million from a tech acquisition. You're not the same person who walked into this office 4 days ago, Luna. It's time to stop acting like you are. Marcus stood up. I'll be there, Dorothy believed. In you. The least I can do is stand beside you when you need it. At 3:17 p.m., the documents went live. At 3:24 p.m., the first news alert appeared. Mystery heir, 8-year-old bookkeeper inherits $94M empire. At 3:31 p.m., my mother called. I didn't answer. At 3:33 p.m., Rachel called. Then my father, then Travis, then all of them again, over and over. At 3:45 p.m., my father's text came through on my old phone. What the hell have you done? Call me now. I forwarded it to Victoria. Her response, perfect. More evidence of their panic. By 4:30 p.m., I was standing in a private room adjacent to Hartwell and Associates' main conference hall, wearing a suit Victoria had bought for me, navy blue, perfectly tailored, the kind of outfit that commanded respect. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. They're here, Victoria said, looking at her tablet. Your parents and Rachel just arrived in the lobby. Building security is holding them downstairs, but they're demanding to speak with you. Demanding. I repeated. Even now, they thought they could control me. Let them up, I said, but have security present. I want witnesses. Edward nodded approvingly. Conference room A. We'll be right outside. 5 minutes later, I sat alone at a massive conference table as my parents and Rachel were escorted in. My mother looked like she'd aged 10 years in 4 days. My father's face was red with barely controlled rage. Rachel's designer confidence had evaporated into pure desperation. You lying little, my father started. Sit down, I said quietly. Something in my voice made them stop. They sat. Explain this, my mother said, slamming a document on the table, the corporate disclosure showing my ownership stakes. Explain how you stole your grandmother's assets. I didn't steal anything, I said. Grandma Dorothy transferred ownership to me 3 years ago, legally, properly. Completely documented. That's impossible, Rachel said. The will. It was a test, I finished. One you all. Failed spectacularly. I pulled out my laptop and turned it toward them. With one click, I played my father's voice from the wire recording. We're thinking of setting up a family trust, pooling resources, making sure everything is handled properly. Then my mother, if you're willing to work with us, to be part of this trust structure, we can make sure you're provided for. I paused it. That's a conspiracy to commit fraud. There's 3 hours more of recordings where you detail your plans to manipulate Rachel's inheritance. My father's face went white. But wait, I said, pulling out more documents. There's also these photographs. You and Rachel met secretly for 6 months before she were connected with Grandma Dorothy. There's the $50,000 wire transfer from your account to hers. And there's Grandma's recordings documenting every conversation where you asked her for money, every time you tried to manipulate her. Rachel stood up. You can't, this is entrapment or something. Will, sue. With what money? I asked. Your inheritance is worthless, Rachel. Campbell Textiles is $2 million in debt. The properties are over-leveraged. Even the jewelry Grandma left you is fake. She sold the real pieces years ago. Rachel's legs seemed to give out. She sat down hard. As for you two, I said, looking at my parents, you owe $891,000 to creditors. You thought Grandma's estate would save you. Instead, you're about to be exposed as frauds who tried to manipulate a dying woman's will. Every news outlet in Boston will have this story by tomorrow morning. Luna, please, my mother said. And for the first time I could remember, she sounded genuinely afraid. We're family. We can work this out privately. Family? The word tasted bitter. You offered me $2,000 a month like I was a charity case. You've dismissed me my entire life. You walked past me in that lobby like I was invisible. Now you want to talk about family? My father's expression hardened. If you do this, if you go public, you'll never see us again. Good, I said simply. The door opened. Edward and Victoria stood there with building security. Time's up, Edward said. Luna has a press conference to attend. As security escorted them out, Rachel turned back one last time. She was my grandmother too, she said weakly. Then you should have treated her like it. I replied. The press conference was a blur, cameras flashing, reporters shouting questions. Me standing at a podium flanked by Edward and Victoria, explaining in clear, simple terms how my grandmother had built an empire, how she'd tested her family's character, how she'd chosen me as her heir. I played snippets of Dorothy's recordings. I showed documentation of the corporate transfers. I presented evidence of my family's conspiracy without naming them, directly letting the reporters connect the dots themselves. The questions came fast. How does it feel to inherit $94 million? Will you keep your bookkeeping job? What will you do with Campbell Textiles? To that last one, I smiled. Campbell Textiles is launching a sustainable fashion line that will revolutionize the industry. My grandmother believed in innovation. I'm going to honor that belief. Marcus Webb stepped forward then, holding up his fabric samples. The cameras loved it, the young designer and the unlikely heir, building something new from Dorothy Campbell's legacy. When it was over, when the reporters finally dispersed and the cameras stopped rolling, I stood in Edward's office looking out over Boston Harbor. The city lights reflected off dark water, creating paths of gold across the surface. Your grandmother would have loved that, Edward said quietly. You were magnificent. My phone, the old one, buzzed one last time. Travis. I didn't know what they were planning. I swear. I was just doing my job. I'm sorry, Luna. I believed him. Travis had been their unwitting trigger, genuinely trying to do the right thing. Maybe someday I'd forgive him, but not today. What happens now? I asked. Now, Victoria said. You live your life. You run your companies. You make your grandmother proud. And you never let anyone make you feel small again. 6 months later, Campbell Textiles' sustainable line launched to international acclaim. Marcus Webb's face was on magazine covers. The company's stock price tripled. The Quantum Edge acquisition was finalized, depositing $180 million into accounts I'd established. I used part of it to fund scholarships for young women in business, naming the program after Dorothy Campbell. My parents declared bankruptcy. Rachel moved to Florida, working as a receptionist, drowning in the debt she couldn't escape. I felt no satisfaction in their downfall, only a quiet sense of justice. Travis and I eventually talked. He'd left the corporate law firm and started doing pro bono work for nonprofits. We'd never be close, but we were civil. Sometimes that was enough. As for me, I moved out of my studio apartment into a modest townhouse in Cambridge. Nothing ostentatious, I was still Luna Martin, still uncomfortable with excess. But it had a home office where I could work, a garden where I could think, and enough space to finally breathe. On Dorothy Campbell's birthday, I visited her grave. I brought sustainable fabric samples from Campbell Textiles' new line and laid them on the grass. You were right, I whispered. I showed them who I really am. Thank you for believing in me. The wind rustled through the cemetery trees, and for just a moment, I could have sworn I heard my grandmother's laugh, proud, knowing, and free. I'd inherited her empire. But more than that, I'd inherited her strength, and that was worth more than all the money in the world. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.